Did you ever sit back and wonder whether the different personality types affected ADHD in their own unique and different ways? Well, I'm here to tell you absolutely so. Absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. The different personality types and their characteristics and cognitive functions that come within personality types greatly affect the way people deal with issues that come with ADHD. On top of that, you have your nature and nurture factors and the uniqueness that comes with a person's unique upbringing, the type of individuals involved in that person's upbringing, and the surrounding environment. And before we jump into this, I just want to state that there is much more variety than is thought when it comes to these cognitive functions of the different personality types. There are subsets upon even more subsets. The letters vary greatly in ratio. And I just want to give a heads up that this video is particularly about ADHD and the personality types and how the individual can act when they're not feeling good and how to kind of spot it within yourself or how to spot it within a friend or family member so you can help them out and you can keep things smooth if you catch the drift. So stuff doesn't go awry, doesn't go out of whack, and people don't have a meltdown and life is good. Which can be a little tough when the ADHD comes a knocking, especially when you're not having a good day. Whether it be because of not eating, not sleeping right, someone really upset you because of RSD. And speaking of RSD, yes, this will have a lot to do with this video as well. Rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I have a whole long video on that. Link in the description below. So, yes, there are many variants. Some personality types are much more common here in the US. Some types are much more common in different parts of the world. And some types are really rare in some places and not so rare in others. Isn't the beauty of variety beautiful? Yes. So, let's go over a couple letters before we jump into the fun and the hootenanny. We have the different letters. We have the 8 different letters out of the 16 personality types, which does not mean that there only exist 16 personality types. There are subvariants among subvariants ad nauseum. You can keep going. You have a certain personality type with these 4-letter combinations, and they meet somebody else of that same personality type. They can be completely different people. Why? Because ratios of the letters, of how strong some of the letters are, with the characteristics that they bring, can be completely different than the other person. Why? Because our lives are lived uniquely. So, going first. In the first slot of the 4 letters here, when it comes to the personality types, we have the E's or the I's. Now, the E stands for extroverts. Extroverts are energized by people, enjoy a variety of tasks, a quick pace, and are good at multitasking. So, extroverts, lively people, like to be around other people, feel good, want to be by themselves, tendency to get bored a little bit perhaps, but don't get me wrong, some extroverts need their time alone. Some extroverts need quite a bit of time alone, but generally speaking, extroverts like to be around people, like a quick pace, multitasking, being around other people, pumps you up, good time, do the do. Introverts, on the other hand, introverts often like working alone or in small groups, prefer a more deliberate pace, and like to focus on one task at a time. Introverts like being in their own world a lot of the time, doing stuff the way they like to internalize it. Sometimes working with too many people can be, it can be a little stressful. We can get bored, we can get irritated, annoyed, saddened, fill in the blank. So we prefer to work by ourselves a good amount of time, which does not mean that introverts are all, I want to be alone all the time. No, absolutely not. There are millions, tons, thousands, whatever number you want to say, many introverts who like to be around a lot of people, like to have a good time, and can actually be quite extroverted. It depends. It really depends on the person's upbringing and the details that entails. So that is for the first slot. You will either be an E for an extrovert or an I for an introvert. For the second letter, we have the sensing types and we have the intuitives. So that S stands for sensing, sensors. Sensors, or sensing types, are realistic people who like to focus on the facts and details. They apply common sense and past experience to find practical solutions to problems. Now, sensing people are really in the outside world, meaning that facts and figures of what's been done and kind of how it's always been done is kind of their thing. Not the most abstract thinkers that are intuitive and think deep within, rationalize new ideas. What if we did it like this? Not exactly sensor territory. Sensing people are really good at knowing the outside world and what that entails. Not to say that a sensing type is not intuitive. Absolutely not. I have many friends who are sensing types who are quite intuitive and very in their thoughts. But there's also quite a bit of people who are sensing types who are very much, it ain't Christmas if there ain't no snow, and you cannot change their mind. Those are the people who need certain requirements for them to consider something. So then you have the intuitives. N in this case. Intuitives prefer to focus on possibilities and the big picture, easily see patterns, value innovation, see creative solutions to problems. So here's where the differences between intuitives and sensors comes in. Listen, just the definition alone is very different. Intuitives prefer on focusing on the big possibilities and the big picture, easily see patterns, value innovation. Value innovation. Here is where there's a contrast. Intuitives like working on ideas and things and doing it in ways that have not been done before necessarily. And that could be scary to a sensing type who's like, it's always been done like this, so why the hell would we do it any different? Because of progress, because of wanting to innovate. So, yes, that could be an issue. Especially when an intuitive sees a different way of doing something and then they're not seen or taken seriously, especially if they're working in a sensing environment where a majority of people are sensing types. Or just like the other way around, when you have a sensing type who knows what's going to happen in a situation more concretely, and you have intuitives who have never done it thinking that something's going to happen a certain way, and the sensing type's like, no. If we do that, this is going to, explode or something bad's going to happen. So it really depends on the nature of it. And I'm going to get into it in more detail later on. So, and here's where we have a giant contrast in this country. We have the thinkers and then we have the feelers, i.e. we have the T's, the logical types, and F, the feeling types. So this is for the third letter, and one of the biggest contrasts within the personality types. We have thinkers. Thinkers tend to make their decisions using logical analysis, objectively weigh pros and cons, and value honesty, consistency, and fairness. So to a thinking type, logic seems to be the go-to when it comes to making decisions. And a value of fairness. If something occurs, usually logical types, if something happens, they cannot get angry with something, or they don't get angry with something if it's not realistic or logical. There's not much of a concern to logically concern yourself with something that is not logically realistic or possible to happen. A lot of logic in logical types, which can also be difficult as well, because logic is not the only thing you have to use when making a decision. Sometimes we have to understand the emotions and the feelings behind some of the people that we're working with and why they do what they do. So a balance is definitely needed. We have now the feeling types, which would be the other letter in the scenario, which we would term these the feelers. Feelers tend to be sensitive and cooperative and decide based on their own personal values and how others will be affected by their actions. Notice how there's much more of a camaraderie vibe amongst feelers. They tend to be sensitive and cooperative and decide based on their own personal values. Key phrases there. Own personal values. And how others will be affected by their actions. Here's where a logical type is, okay, does that really matter? Do other people's feelings in this scenario matter? And that could be a sense of a lot of conflict, because sometimes a decision needs to be made where there's going to be a certain group of people, a certain person, a large group of people, whatever number it may be, that might not like what's going to happen. But for the better of the business, of the situation, of the overall circumstance, some things need to happen. And sometimes that disrupts the harmony of what's going on. So it's the means of how to approach that, how to find that balance. That's why in certain situations, there's always going to be a group of people, or one person, or a few people, however many, that is not going to like the outcome, and there's going to be the opposite group that's going to like the outcome. So we have that amongst the thinkers and the feelers. Then we have the judgers, and then we have the perceivers. This last letter group, the J's or the P's, is essentially the motor of the personality types. This is what's the biggest driver in terms of how you're going to conduct yourself to an extent. And it's really important. When you study cognitive functions, you're going to see what I mean. Let's start with the J's, the judgers. Judgers tend to be organized and prepared, like to make and stick to plans, and are comfortable following most rules. So J's, they're going to know what they're going to be doing, especially if they're pretty strict with themselves. They're going to know what they're going to be doing next week at 5 o'clock on Tuesday. They're going to exaggeratedly plan when they're going to use the restroom. And they like making schedules and like sticking to them. Not really good at improvising sometimes because of that. Not really good at improvising. Sometimes they don't like changing plans. They like making a plan. They have an idealization sometimes of the way stuff should be. And there's going to be a problem with that person either internally or outwardly, depending on the rest of the personality type characteristics. So, overall, judgers like to plan, be organized, stick to plans, and have an idealization of how certain situations should be. Then we have the other letters. P, for perceivers. Perceivers prefer to keep their options open. They like to be able to act spontaneously and like to be flexible when making plans. Usually people who are perceivers are quite good at improvising. They like doing something when the elements or the circumstance kind of feels best to do. Because you cannot plan. Sometimes you cannot plan to do something grand and grandiose. Sometimes the elements involved require you to wait so you can figure out more information. So perceivers usually can be pretty quick on their feet. They don't mind changing plans. They like being spontaneous with them. If the plans change, they can change with those plans within seconds, within minutes, however long and however disciplined they are. But they can improvise quite well, and if something needs to change, a game plan needs to change, a scenario needs to change, they'll figure out what they need to do pretty quick. That's a skill that they both have. They can figure stuff out pretty quick because of this, and it helps them improvise and do what they got to do. Just like the judgers, the J's, they're really good at creating their schedule and sticking to it. And they can be quite excellent in that sort of way. The key here is balance. Now, I've spoken about these letters in a very idealistic way. Unfortunately, our folks don't always bring us up in the most ideal way, and neither do instructors, and neither does life for that matter. So some of these letters in some individuals can be quite strong and can be a little overbearing. And sometimes some of these letters can be so weak and so untrained that there's going to be quite a bit of problems. You can have someone, for instance, who's such a critical, unbalanced J that wants stuff done exactly how they planned it, that they're going to throw a fit unless something is done like that. Or you have a perceiver who has such a flexibility with schedules that they never stick to plans. They make plans with a family member or friend, and they just keep flaking on them over and over again. That's just a good example of that. I can give you many, many examples for each of the letters, but I'm not, because we're going to jump into the different personality types now. Now you got an idea of what the different letters represent. So if you want to take this test before we dive into the personality types to see what personality type you are as the listener, I left a link yet again down below that you can see. Okay? The Myers-Briggs exam. It's going to take you roughly, I don't know, I would say maybe 20 plus minutes. And if you take the test, I recommend you take it twice and you give answers that are honest, really honest, not your ideal version of yourself, but how you really are and how you really act and what you really believe with those questions. Don't try to sound amazing. Don't try to sound bad. Be as honest as you can and take the test twice so you can have a pretty concrete idea of what personality type you might be. Okay? The more honest you are, the better the results, the more this video will help you out. So I'll be waiting right here until you get back. Alright, now that you took your test and you came back and you know what personality type you are, and you've read a little bit about it maybe, let's dive into the nitty-gritty. Going on to the next personality type, we have the INTJ. In their healthiest form, INTJs have a clear vision of the future and how to organize systems to implement their ideas. There is no challenge too complex for them, and they are quickly able to synthesize abstract and concrete data to find deep insights into the meaning of things. They are strategic, logical, visionary, and creative. When it comes to decisions, they are rational and objectively critical. It is extremely important for them to be fair and just. Biases and preferential treatment are avoided at all cost. On the outside, they appear independent and contemplative. Inside, they hold themselves to a deep set of values and morals. Now, INTJs at their worst. In their unhealthiest state, INTJs are very confusing to be around. They can't seem to find the appropriate words to express their inner vision. In the face of this confusion, they become aloof and abrupt with people, irritated that they are being misunderstood. Instead of trying to find a clear way to express themselves, they instead believe they are superior to others and become arrogant and judgmental. Some unhealthy INTJs can be so obsessed with their vision that they lose sight of other possibilities and responsibilities. They will overlook details and facts that don't fit into their vision and ignore personal relationships as they go after their goal. They can become selfish and harsh with their words because they fail to consider how anything will affect other people. So if you are an INTJ or know someone who is an INTJ, these are some things to look out for. I have not worked with an INTJ in counseling, but I have worked with INTJs outside of counseling, so not much because they're a pretty rare personality type. So I haven't encountered all that many INTJs. So if you're an INTJ or know someone who's an INTJ, understand that these aspects mentioned here can sometimes be things of trouble. And if you are an INTJ and feel that you struggle in some of these areas, then it's time to take the initiative and get a go at them. I know the motivation might be like, for what? I've made it work my whole life. How come I can't continue doing it now? I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you plainly that if you try to help yourself out, particularly through the ADHD avenue, meaning that you help out your neurochemistry of the neurotransmitters that you have lower levels of. If you get that on check, those characteristics that I mentioned are going to diminish, and some of them are going to just stop happening altogether. And for some INTJs who felt like, well, I've felt like this a majority of my life. What if that's just me? Well, not necessarily. If you're conditioned and go through certain things throughout your life, yes, there's going to be some features in your personality type that are going to be pretty prominent, but if you have never had your neurochemistry taken care of in consideration for the condition that you have, then that's an outcome you do not know. You have never experienced that if you have never tried to take care of yourself. So that would be my word of advice, is to take care of yourself in that sort of way. Take care of your ADHD. And if you really want to go the full circle, give medication a try as well. I have a video on supplements and neurotransmitters that people with ADHD have low levels of. And there's a link of it down below if you want to check it out. So going back to the actions, though, of the INTJ at their worst, the being obsessed with your vision, losing sight of possibilities and other responsibilities, and then overlooking details and facts that don't fit into that, and ignoring relationships and aspects of friends sometimes just to go and finish up what you need to do. Relationships and friendships, they're very important in our life. And the INTJ, for my research, can be very isolative sometimes. And if inattentive ADHD is involved, I can imagine that the isolation is going to be a lot higher. So it's not always the healthiest thing to do. We sometimes need to balance ourselves out by being with other people, regardless of how introverted that we are. Now, granted, those other people that you go around or might want to hang out with should be somebody or a group of people that are going to be of positive benefit to you, just like you're going to be to them. They're going to be of mutual benefit to you, just like you're going to be to them. Otherwise, it can get pretty stringent. An individual that spends a lot of time by themselves, it has characteristics that it changes of the personality sometimes. So if we're alone a lot as an INTJ and we're not taking care of ourselves and not taking care of the ADHD, that can create a lot of problems, because when you do go around other people, whether it be for a family get-together or seeing friends or whatnot, as an INTJ, you might come off as maybe a little intense, maybe a little rude, a little disregarding, or just like you don't care and you don't want to be there and you want to go home. And that can be quite hurtful to to your loved ones, to your family and your friends. And in the long run, that's not going to be helpful to you, because there's going to be times where you're going to need the help of your friends and your family. And if you haven't treated them all that good, and especially if you don't have a connection with them, they're not going to want to help you out. And they might even flat out ignore you, especially if you've upset them many times or have done something really bad. So relationships take effort. So you want to take care of yourself so you can also maintain not a super social relationship, but at least speak and, connect to family or friends, at least on a more frequent basis than is commonly associated with INTJs who have ADHD, particularly some who have inattentive ADHD, because then wanting to be alone is going to be a very frequent thing. So we cannot lose sight of the positive benefits that come from human connection. As humans, we're social creatures. Some of us like to be alone quite a bit, but at the end of the day, we still want to be loved and cared for. I know for an INTJ that must sound pretty cringy, but yes, even INTJs, in the core, they do. As much as some of them are probably not wanting to admit it right now, of course, but that's okay. So I advise you, work on what you need to work on. If you're pushing people away and have this vision where you just become arrogant and judgmental, be mindful of that. Call out your thoughts when they happen, and don't fall into that. And if it's really hard, you got to try to take care of your condition first. If you had trauma or have had issues with RSD, start working on that as well. And if you need a guide or anything like that, there's a lot of information out there on YouTube. As a J, you can definitely look at a lot of other individuals who are also Js as well, judgers, I mean, or perhaps other INTJs, and you can look them up and see how they've done their stuff. And you can perhaps get some ideas and regimens from them. I know that for a lot of individuals who have the J function, that regimens or strategies and stuff of that nature are very helpful, especially from people that the person with the J function finds helpful or finds suitable for their needs. So Something I highly recommend. INTJs, another personality type. Top two, the INTP and the INTJ, are known as the two intellectual elites. So, a lot of responsibility in that head. If inattentive ADHD is present, the individual is probably more than likely going to be really in their head a good amount of the time. So, yes, we sometimes need to get out of that and see what's going on outside of our thoughts. So, if you haven't tried getting your condition, getting the help for it that you need, perhaps it's time to give it a try. You never know what you're going to be capable of doing until you work at your best, until you get your neurochemistry helped out. So you don't have to, but I would advise. I would say that it would be really helpful and beneficial. As someone who's an INT as well, getting my condition under control has helped me be able to do so many things I would have loved and would have wished to have done when I was younger. I can't change that now, but here I am doing it now. I got the help that I needed. I was able to turn my life around, and I want to help other people out. So if you're an INTJ, get the help that you need. You can make wonders. You can help mankind out in such a positive way if you only help yourself out first. So I hope you can get the help that you need, and I hope this video gives you some insight. Going on now to the ESFP. At their best, ESFPs are enthusiastic and fun-loving. They are observant and in tune with the moment, finding opportunities to enjoy nature, people, experiences, animals, and more. Generosity comes natural to them, and they are warm and open-minded to all different types of people. They respond quickly to meet people's practical needs and are skilled at mobilizing individuals to deal with crisis. On top of their gregarious nature, they are also practical and level-headed. They have a quick resourcefulness that enables them to make the most of any situation. At their worst, ESFPs, in their unhealthy state, are overly impulsive and distractible. Sounds just like ADHD when you really think about it. Pleasure and fun becomes everything. Let me read that again. Pleasure and fun becomes everything. Does that sound like an ESFP, Or if you're an ESFP, that probably sounds just like you. Maybe. And they lose. So it says pleasure and fun becomes everything. They lose touch with their deeply held values. On top of this, they tend to take things personally and misread other people's intentions. In work as well as home life, they often forget their responsibilities and obligations because they are so impulsive and disorganized. They become excessively short-sighted and unable to see the long-term consequences of their actions. So, ESFP is a very life of the party type of individuals who like to have a good time. They like to hang out with their certain friends. Might not be a big group all the time, but yeah, they have the core friends that they hang out with. They love interacting with other people, finding out what they're about, and then talking about themselves too, and just interacting. And they have this very, very vivacious vibe to them. I have family members who are ESFPs, and yeah, wherever we go, man, it's almost like they'll talk to anybody. So anyway, what happens when the ESFP is at their worst is that, yeah, they have trouble with a lot of ADHD, it seems, issues of being overly impulsive and easily distracted. They want to just have fun. Responsibility kind of goes out the window, and they're like, that's not fun. I don't want to do that today. Let's just go over here. So what happens is if you're an ESFP or know someone who's an ESFP and notice these things, you gotta work on them. And if you're somebody who knows somebody who's an ESFP, go and help them out with this. If you feel it in your heart to do so. Because if you're an ESFP who has ADHD, yeah, there's going to definitely be problems balancing the checkbook, so to speak, Financial problems with people who are ESFPs who have ADHD is very common. It's a very common issue I've had working with ESFPs is the financial issues, intimacy problems, financial issues, having affairs in marriages, or either cheating on your significant other are common scenarios I see with ESFPs who have ADHD. Usually because if they have hyperactive ADHD, they're going to have a pretty big libido and want to, have relations frequently sometimes. And if the partner they're going out with, if they don't have that high libido that comes with hyperactive ADHD sometimes, then that partner is going to go seek that stuff elsewhere. And that can be very damaging in the relationship. So ESFPs, if you're hearing this, understand that you have responsibilities and obligations. You have to organize your life. You have to understand that there are long-term consequences to your actions. Not everything is going to be fun and let's just have a good time and see where it goes. Life needs structure. You need balance, and you need to understand that there are sometimes people depending upon you. Life can't be all about having a good time and leaving the responsibilities aside. So if you feel you're in this world, in that negative world of just carelessness and interpreting people's actions as negative, like, how dare that person say that about me, or look at them, they must be thinking this about me, they're going to go and do that. If that is entering your mind frequently, it's because you're not at your best. And it also has to do with a lack of norepinephrine and a lack of acetylcholine. And if you're not sure what those are two neurotransmitters. I have a video on neurotransmitters, ADHD and supplements. Now, granted, I know it's going to be a little hard to watch considering the condition, but give it a shot. It can be very helpful to find out why you have trouble, not only you, but people with ADHD in general, why they have trouble with what they do and what we can do about it to help ourselves out. So ESFPs, the ones I've met, they can be very loving people, but they can also be people who, when traumatized or when they have trauma, they can act really, really insensitive to other people and can start yelling and doing all sorts of dramatic things. So we got to keep ourselves under control. Unfortunately, sometimes if you have ADHD, the trauma can be so big, can be so intense, that some of the ESFP clients I've worked with, when the trauma re-kicks in, they become that person that they were when the trauma happened. It can be quite frightening, quite sad for the ESFP when they're going through that. So that's something you got to work on. There's help out there. Sometimes I've noticed that ESFPs don't really believe in themselves, at least when it comes to stuff that's disciplinary and has a regimen. Trust me, you can do it. And if your ADHD makes it hard for you to do it, then start taking supplements that are going to help you out with that regimen. Work with somebody. If you need to work with a counselor, a psychologist of some sort, find a local psychologist or therapist or ADHD counselor or coach that'll help you out and get the help that you need. You can also hit me up as well. I do online and phone therapy as well for those interested. So there is help out there. You don't have to feel at your worst or feel that you're going to remain like that. There definitely is help out there. Understand, too, that when you have ADHD sometimes, if you're an ESFP, you're going to have trouble learning how to do certain things. And you're going to tell yourself, how come other people can do this so easily and I can't? What's wrong with me? Let me tell you something. The reason why you can't do some of those things sometimes is because you're working with people sometimes who are neurotypicals, who can do things that you can't, and they can do it easier because the job is made for people like that. If you're not taking care of yourself, taking care of your condition, you're not going to be 100%. You need to take care of yourself first before you can go out and do those things. Don't judge yourself so critically. If you're not taking care of yourself and taking care of your condition, don't judge yourself to those same standards as neurotypicals. Neurotypicals being people who don't have any condition. Be realistic about it. Help yourself out. ESFP's got a really good heart. You guys can definitely do it. Believe me, I believe in you. I've worked with many ESFPs, and I have a lot of relatives and friends over the years who have been ESFPs. Good-hearted people. Sometimes you all like to have a little too much fun. Oh man, I can write books on the adventures and scenarios I have been with ESFPs. Let me tell you, ESFPs like to have a good time. And in my humble opinion, I think Ric Flair is an ESFP. And yeah, the Nature Boy does reflect a lot of ADHD characteristics. And a lot of people would be surprised how common ADHD is in both wrestling and in martial arts. So just putting it out there. ESFP's got a good heart. We just need to learn how to control and how to organize and how to set up a regimen and a schedule sometimes. I know it sounds really unappealing, especially if you haven't had that a majority of your life, but it's something we gotta do. We gotta be responsible. Going on to the next personality type, we have the ENFJ. ENFJs at their best, in their healthiest states, ENFJs are extremely empathetic and visionary. They radiate warmth and understanding, are quick to see how everyone's actions affect everyone else. They prize harmony and are skilled peacemakers. They know how to inspire people and bring out their hidden gifts and abilities. When it comes to planning, ENFJs are organized and creative. They tend to find new and insightful ways to reach goals or make their ideals a reality. In their decision-making, they consider the needs of others and their own morals and values before moving forward. So, an ENFJ, at their worst, ENFJs can be so adamant about having harmony and making sure everyone gets along that they ignore issues that might cause conflict. They can also get quickly irritated or pushy with people who they see as disrupting harmony or being selfish, even if those people have important feedback and input to consider. When it comes to decisions, these ENFJs may overlook logical details and aspects in favor of maintaining harmony at all cost. Once again, when it comes to decisions, these ENFJs may overlook logical details and aspects in favor of maintaining harmony at all cost. Criticism, whether constructive or critical, is taken very hard. They will either feel guilty and overcome with self-doubt, or they may become passive-aggressive and feel that the person offering the criticism is out to get them. So, if you are an ENFJ or know someone who is an ENFJ, perhaps even hearing some of these things about yourself might be a little difficult. A little self-denial is probably going on right now. A little, hey, I don't like you, dude, talking to me through the computer or phone. So, if that's the case, I apologize. I don't mean to cause any rift or any harm. I'm just trying to point out a couple of things here. If you know an ENFJ, or if you're dating one or married to one, and these are things that you notice in them, help them out. Talk to them about this. Make them understand that personality types that are extroverts with the feeling function rather than the logical function, so extroverted feeling types, they tend to want harmony at all times, or a majority of the time when they're not feeling good. Why? Because that makes them feel good. So if somebody or something else comes and wants to disrupt the harmony, or if what the other person does, whether it's with good intention or not, extroverted feeling types sometimes want to stop what the other person's doing. So sometimes even talking about the possibility that somebody in a family might have ADHD, or that an individual might have ADHD, well, that can cause disharmony. That can disrupt the harmony in the family. So I've worked with some families who flat out refuse to believe that ADHD is a thing, much less refuse to believe that their son or daughter has ADHD. And if you're a parent who is one of those parents who believes and acts in that manner, well, let me tell you, you're doing a big disservice to your son or daughter by not getting them help with their condition. I'm not saying you have to get medication or you have to get supplements, but you got to do at least something. Going through school, people with ADHD will tell you, I'll tell you, going through school without having help for ADHD is barbaric. It is intensely difficult for a lot of us. And I know since ENFJs have the J function, they're pretty good at organizing and getting it going. But there's going to be a point, particularly in college, with the people I have worked with and other colleagues who tell me, when it comes to college and university for an ENFJ, if they do decide to go, that's where the problems come. Because once the ADHD takes hold, it doesn't matter how disciplined that J function is sometimes. The ADHD will get in the way of the work. Because sometimes, depending on the major that we're in, what we got to do, or just if you're not going to college or university, it's the responsibilities of life that take their toll. In order sometimes for us to progress in life and work on the issues we need to work on, we need to experience disharmony. We need to look at the sometimes ugly reality of what we're facing. So trying to coddle ourselves and stay in that harmony world that we're in, regardless of the negative implications that are going on, is not a logical thing to do. At some point, you will need to take responsibility of yourself if you're an ENFJ who has ADHD, because life will at some point get difficult. And if you're responsible for other people, are in a position of leadership, and you are indebted to those people to help them out in your line of work, and you would be doing a great disservice to not be at your best, or at least close to your best, just because of choosing not to. So choosing not to and letting other people suffer on account of you not wanting to believe something due to you not wanting to go through disharmony is unfair to all of those working with you. It may sound a little harsh, but that's what it is. Get yourself the help that you need. Understand that being passive aggressive is not going to help you out. Instead, you are going to upset somebody. And if you upset the wrong person, you are really going to regret it. Being passive aggressive in the workplace and in places in general does not fly with a lot of people. I have seen and experienced my own sort of thing with people who are passive aggressive, and I've also seen a couple of colleagues in different work areas get what's coming to them for being passive aggressive. So I'd be a little careful about that. Be upfront, confront your problems when you need to, and most of all, start working on your own problem, which is getting your ADHD under control if you haven't so already. ENFJs have got a big heart, also a good group of people. I've worked with a few ENFJs, not all that much, but I've had nothing but positive experiences with them. So I do believe that ENFJs can also turn their life around if they need to. It can turn their thoughts around and can get out of that wanting to get away from the harmony, and they can start seeking help. It's definitely possible. With a disciplined personality type, you got the J at the end. I believe if you get a good regimen going, whether it be for someone you admire or a group of people you admire, and start taking care of your ADHD, start taking care of the neurotransmitters that you have low levels of. I have a supplement video if you'd like to take a look in the link below. And it explains what neurotransmitters people with ADHD have low levels of. So I'd highly recommend that you check that out and work on the areas that you need work on. And then once you get the supplements that you need, and if you decide to take medication, then when you know what you're like, your ideal self, when you're closer, working at 100%, due to your neurochemistry being improved and your condition being taken care of, then you're going to see perhaps what your true potential is. And you might even want to try different things in life, new careers, and, possibilities are endless. So you owe it to yourself to take care of yourself. So do the best that you can. I've seen people really low pick themselves up, so I don't doubt an ENFJ can. Good-hearted people who've got a good sense of work ethic, so I definitely think it's possible. We got personality type numero uno in the US, which is the most common personality type. 11 through 14% of the population has this personality type, and that is the ISTJ. We have the I for introverted. We have the S for a sensing type. So we have an introverted individual who's really good at concrete facts of the outside world. Logical type, not exactly a feeling type based off emotions, but based off logic. And a J, who likes to make plans and stick to them to an extent. So, a little definition of the ISTJ here. Healthy ISTJs are extremely responsible, honest, loyal. They have a strong, methodical commitment to their goals and work with steady determination to meet them. They are self-motivated, detail-oriented, and competent. They hold themselves to high standards and value trustworthy behavior in themselves and others. So, they're good, helpful people. They're usually really meticulous at details and really admire certain characteristics of hard work in other people, and generally just kind of want to help out. So, ISTJs at their worst, this is what can occur to any ISTJ. But if you have ADHD, you're not sleeping right, you're not eating right, and something is causing you issues throughout the day or upsetting you, these are things that might occur. RSD itself can make you act like this. So you don't have to be going through a lot of bad stuff. You can be doing great and everything's going smoothly, and someone can say something or do something to you, and if you experience that RSD, that rejection sensitivities for you, it could make you act in some of these ways. So for those of you guys who are ISTJs, see if any of this sounds familiar. ISTJs at their worst. ISTJs at their worst can be so set on doing things the way they've always been done that they shut out all new ideas and possibilities. If they haven't developed their sensing preference well, meaning if they haven't balanced that S with intuition well, they may jump to conclusions about people or take action without taking time to see if they're being fair and reasonable. Unhealthy ISTJs can be rigid about time, structure, and routine. They also tend to be highly critical and judgmental of other people, easily seeing their flaws and pointing them out in a way that is humiliating to the person involved. They can struggle to see the big picture or the impacts of their decisions on others. They tend to make their loved ones feel distant or uncared for because they see expressions of affection or words of affirmation as unnecessary and trivial. So if ISTJs, you're going to notice them be really hypercritical of a mistake or perhaps of something you did, or if you did it, or if you have a flaw of some sort, they will pick at it. Or not all of them will, but this is a habit I've seen a lot of ISTJs I've worked with, is that they become these, I know everything. Nobody else knows as much as me. Why the hell are people acting so foolish? So ISTJs, from the ones I've worked with and some of the friends that I have, can be really rigid and can be really insulting, and they can also humiliate family members and friends that upset them when their RSD has been triggered or when they haven't been doing good for a while. So what happens is that some personality types go through what we call the shadow personality type. This is what happens when the individual hasn't taken care of themselves all that well. So every letter flips to the opposite of itself. And the reason why it flips to the opposite of itself is because those other letters, the opposite that they become, the individual has not been trained with. They have been repressed all those years because they never really learned how to handle those aspects of the personality because that's not their forte or where they went to. So, for example, the shadow personality type of an ISTJ would be an ENFP. So, if you look at an ENFP when they're not doing all that good, which we will when we get to that personality type in a bit, that's similar to what happens to the ISTJ when they're not doing good. The ISTJ can become really reckless and can just go out, look out to have a good time, and can unfortunately sometimes even get a substance abuse problem, can manipulate people to get whatever they want out of them. They can unfortunately really damage themselves and a lot of other people in the long run due to their lack of empathy that can sometimes come with feeling like this. Granted, I'm not saying every ISTJ acts like this, but this can definitely be an area of concern. So, if you're an ISTJ and you're hearing this and might be something new to you, or whether you're an ISTJ, it's just like, that's not me, I don't do that. Really think about that. Is that the ego talking? Is that your guard talking? Or do you really not do that? And if you're not sure about it, then you need to become introspective about that. You need to go within and see the effect that your actions do on those you affect when you're entering that negative zone, what they call the shadow personality type, the ISTJ at their worst. When you enter that shadow personality type, if you're not aware of the actions of what you're doing to other people, you got to start thinking about that. Maybe not while you're in that negative zone, but perhaps at another time. And if you know the habits that you do on people and how you lash out at people during that time, then you got to pick those things. Perhaps not all at once, but one by one. Try to internalize your action. The best thing you can do is call out your thoughts, call out your actions so you don't have to lash out like that at people. And if it's because you were lashed out at when you were younger, you got to stop continuing the trauma that was given to you when you were younger. Because if you keep lashing out at people, you're going to continue that trauma you created or that was created into you from whether it was a teacher, a parent, an uncle, a relative, an aunt, whoever it was. You continue that rigidness of lashing out and hurting people, whether it be because of trauma, especially if it's because of trauma, you need to work on that. Seek guidance, whether it be from a local psychologist, but work to internalize that. Call your thoughts out. Don't just do nothing. There's a lot of information out there that can help you internalize trauma if trauma was indeed the reason why you lash out. But if you lash out because of RSD, if you're one of those people that didn't experience a lot of trauma who's an ISTJ, if you're an ISTJ who didn't experience trauma, but you still lash out at people when you're not doing all that well because of RSD and someone upset you, understand that having the condition can do that to you. It can make you really intense and really upset. Be aware of RSD. And if you don't know much about RSD, you want to know more about it, I got a link in the video below. Check it out. Learn more about it. Watch other videos about it. You don't just got to watch mine. Go to Google, read up about it, and see if you can get yourself some help. An ISTJ can be such an intelligent personality that can be very detail-oriented. I have a few ISTJ friends, and I had an ISTJ friend who I was really close to who was One of the most detail oriented when it came to electronics. The mastermind this individual had when it came to electronics is something I quite admire. So, great personality type that can unfortunately be given a bad name sometimes because of how they lash out at some other people. Internalize that. Understand that not everybody is a logical type. Not everyone is a T. A lot of people are Fs, and they can't handle the criticism that comes sometimes from Ts. They can't handle the rigidness sometimes that comes from that J structure as well, of having to do stuff exactly at a certain time. That's a skill as an ISTJ you have, because those are the letters that you got with you. And if you're an ISTJ who doesn't have those as well, you know what I mean? That's a different story. But there's different varieties here that we're talking about. So that's something to kind of look into. So if you see these characteristics of yourself, lashing out at other people, telling other people they're a waste of time and that they're inefficient, and then, or sometimes maybe putting the blame on yourself, that's not healthy. Watch yourself when you're not feeling that good and try to internalize it and work on it. Believe me, it'll bring quite a bit of difference. I had to internalize a lot of the way I thought, because I thought majority of people were logical-oriented people, Ts. I'm a logical thinking person. So for years, when I would convey information, I would convey it to people as if I was talking to a person who was much more T, much more logical-based. And for emotional people, how you are delivered information is very important, as we will find out when the other personality types come up. So that is it for the ISTJ.